The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet residential street in Dyer County, Tennessee, when Mary Elizabeth Thompson stepped out her front door to retrieve her newspaper. What she discovered instead would shatter the tranquility of this small Tennessee community forever. There, abandoned in a blue car seat on her front porch, was a 7-month-old baby girl, crying softly in the humid summer air. Thompson, a 67-year-old retired schoolteacher, had lived on Elm Street for nearly 4 decades. She had seen children grow up, families move in and out, but never had she encountered anything like this. The infant, wearing only a diaper and a pink onesie, appeared healthy but distressed. A small note tucked beneath the baby simply read, "Please take care of her." The temperature was already climbing toward what would be a sweltering 89-degree day, and Thompson immediately recognized the urgency of the situation. With trembling hands, she carefully lifted the car seat and brought the baby inside, immediately calling 911 at 7:47 a.m. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. There's a baby on my front porch, Thompson stammered, her voice shaking. Someone just left a baby here. She can't be more than 6 or 7 months old. What Mary Thompson didn't know in that moment was that this abandoned infant would be the lone survivor of what authorities would later describe as one of the most brutal family massacres in Tennessee's recent history. The baby's discovery would trigger a manhunt that would captivate the nation and reveal a web of violence, deception, and a killer's shocking claim that he was working undercover for the federal government. Within minutes of Thompson's 911 call, Dyer County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene. Deputy Sarah Mitchell, a 12-year veteran of the force, was the first to respond. As she examined the car's seat and the surroundings, a growing sense of unease settled over her. Something's not right here, Mitchell later told investigators. Babies don't just get abandoned like this unless something terrible has happened. The infant appeared to have been recently fed and changed, suggesting whoever left her had been caring for her until very recently. More troubling, there were no signs of anyone approaching the house. No footprints in the soft earth around the porch. No tire tracks in the driveway. It was as if the baby had simply materialized. Detective James Harrison, a 20-year veteran specializing in missing persons cases, arrived at 8:15 a.m. As he began documenting the scene, his radio crackled with another call that would send chills down his spine. All units, we have a report of suspicious activity in Tiptonville. Multiple vehicles abandoned in a wooded area off Highway 78, requesting backup immediately. Tiptonville was just 23 miles from where the baby had been found. Harrison felt his stomach drop as he realized these incidents might be connected. The baby, who appeared alert and responsive, was quickly transported to the Regional Medical Center for evaluation. Pediatrician Dr. Elena Rodriguez found the infant to be in good health, though slightly dehydrated. This baby has been well cared for, she noted in her report. But the circumstances of her abandonment suggest she may have witnessed something traumatic. As news of the abandoned baby spread to the tight-knit community, residents began gathering in small groups, whispering concerns and theories. Local pastor Robert Williams organized an impromptu prayer circle at the community center. We don't know what's happened, he told the growing crowd, but we need to pray for this child and for whatever family she's been separated from. By noon, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation had been called in. Special Agent Linda Roche, with over 15 years of experience in violent crimes, took one look at the evidence and knew they were dealing with something far more sinister than a simple abandonment case. As investigators began piecing together the mystery, they discovered that the abandoned baby was not without family. Through hospital records and DNA testing that would be fast-tracked, they identified her as the daughter of 20-year-old Adriana Williams. But when they tried to contact Adriana, they were met with an ominous silence. Adriana's grandmother, 72-year-old Betty Williams, hadn't heard from her granddaughter in 3 days. That's not like her, Betty told investigators, her voice heavy with worry. Adriana calls me every single day. She's a devoted mother. She would never leave that baby anywhere. Betty's words painted a picture of a young woman who had overcome significant challenges to build a life for herself and her daughter. Adriana had her struggles, but she was getting her life together. She was working at the local grocery store had her own apartment, and was so proud of little Emma. She'd send me pictures every day. That baby was everything to her. The investigation quickly expanded to include Adriana's immediate family. Her younger brother, 15-year-old Braden Williams, was also missing. Their aunt, 38-year-old Courtney Rose, who had served as a mother figure both children after their parents' deaths in a car accident 5 years earlier, was nowhere to be found. Most troubling of all, 21-year-old James Matthew Wilson, Adriana's boyfriend and the baby's father, had also vanished. Sarah Henderson, Adriana's best friend and co-worker at Patterson's Market, provided crucial testimony about the family's final days. Adriana had been scared, Sarah revealed to investigators. She'd been getting threats from James's ex, but it was more than that. She mentioned that James had gotten mixed up with some dangerous people. Sarah's account grew more disturbing as she continued. On Friday, July 26th, Adriana called me crying. She said James had brought some guy around that she didn't trust. She called him Austin and said he gave her the creeps. She was talking about taking Emma and going to stay with her grandmother for a while. The Austin that Adriana had mentioned would soon become the center of the investigation. Neighbors in the small apartment complex where James Wilson lived began coming forward with accounts of a tall, tattooed man who had been seen frequently at the residence over the past month. He drove a black pickup truck with tinted windows, reported neighbor Maria Santos. Very intimidating. My children were scared of him. He would come and go at all hours. Sometimes shouting matches could be heard from the apartment. Another neighbor, retired veteran Bill Harper, had been keeping closer watch. Something about that guy didn't sit right with me. I'm former military, and you develop instincts about people. This Austin character had the look of someone who'd been to prison. The way he carried himself, the way he watched everything around him, that's learned behavior from doing hard time. The first 911 call reporting the abandoned baby came in at 7:47 a.m. By 8:30 a.m., when authorities received report of abandoned vehicles in Tiptonville, the Dyer County Sheriff's Office had already established a perimeter around both scenes and called for backup from neighboring counties. Sheriff Tommy Patterson, a 30-year law enforcement veteran, arrived at the Tiptonville scene at 9:15 a.m. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his career. I've seen a lot of crime scenes, Patterson later testified, but nothing prepared me for what we discovered in those woods. 3 vehicles had been abandoned in a remote, wooded area approximately 2 miles from the main highway. A silver Honda Civic registered to Adriana Williams sat with its driver's side door ajar, keys still in ignition. 20 yards away, a red Ford F-150 belonging to James Wilson was parked at an odd angle, as if it had been stopped abruptly. The third vehicle, a black Chevrolet Silverado with temporary tags, would later be traced to Austin Robert Drummond. Detective Captain Maria Gonzalez, who headed the initial investigation, immediately recognized the signs of a violent confrontation. There were clear drag marks in the dirt leading from the vehicles toward the tree line, she noted in her report. We found a cell phone, later identified as belonging to Adriana Williams, smashed against a tree. There was blood spatter on the ground near the Honda. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's crime scene unit arrived at 11:30 a.m., bringing with them specialized equipment for what was quickly becoming a homicide investigation. Agent Roche coordinated with local authorities to establish a wider search perimeter. Based on the evidence at the scene, we knew we were looking for bodies, Roche later explained to media. The question was how many, and how far the perpetrator had taken them. 9 units from 3 counties were called in to assist with the search. At 2:17 p.m., Bloodhound Tracker, handled by Officer David Kim from Madison County, alerted to a scent trail leading deeper into the woods. The trail led search teams nearly half a mile from the abandoned vehicles, through dense underbrush and across a small creek. Sheriff Patterson made the grim discovery at 3:42 p.m. I found the first body about 400 yards from where the vehicles were abandoned, he reported over radio. Adult female. Appears to be a gunshot wound to the head. Within the next hour, searchers found 3 more bodies in a rough line, as if they had been forced to walk to their execution site. The victims were later identified as Adriana Williams, 20, her brother Braden Williams, 15, Their Aunt Courtney Rose, 38, and James Matthew Wilson, 21. Dr. Patricia Kumar, the state medical examiner, arrived on scene at 6:30 p.m. to begin preliminary examinations. Her initial assessment was chilling. All 4 victims appeared to have been executed with single gunshot wounds to the head. Based on the positioning of the bodies and the blood evidence, they were likely forced to kneel before being shot. News of the quadruple murder spread through the rural Tennessee communities like wildfire. By evening, word had reached social media, and hashtag Tennessee Family Murders began trending nationally. The contrast between the innocent abandoned baby and the brutal slaughter of her family captured the public's attention and heart. Reverend Michael Thompson of the First Baptist Church at Tiptonville organized the community's first vigil for Tuesday evening, July 30th. More than 800 people gathered in the church parking lot, holding candles and sharing memories of the victims. "This kind of evil has no place in our community," Thompson told the crowd. "But we will stand together and support each other through this darkness." Local businesses began closing early as residents huddled in their homes, many for the first time in their lives locking their doors and windows. Hardware stores reported running out of deadbolts and security systems within 24 hours of the murders becoming public. Janet Morrison, who owned a small cafe in downtown Tiptonville, became an unofficial spokesperson for community's grief. "These weren't strangers," she told reporters. "Courtney Rose came in here every Tuesday for our meatloaf special. She was raising those kids like they were her own after their parents died. Adriana would bring that baby in sometimes. Such a sweet little thing. And now they're all gone except for that precious child." The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate community. Schools in 3 counties implemented heightened security measures. Parents began keeping children indoors after school. The local Walmart started seeing panic buying of home security equipment and ammunition. On social media, the hashtag #FindAustin hashtag began trending as armchair detectives tried to piece together information about the suspect. Photos from the crime scene leaked online despite law enforcement's efforts to control the narrative, further inflaming public sentiment. Country music star Carrie Underwood, who had grown up in nearby Oklahoma, posted on Instagram, "My heart breaks for this Tennessee family, and especially for baby Emma. No child should lose their entire family to such senseless violence. Praying for justice." Local TV news crews from Memphis and Nashville set up round-the-clock coverage. The story was picked up by national networks within 48 hours. CNN's Anderson Cooper opened his show on July 31st by saying, "Tonight, we begin with a story that has shocked a small Tennessee community and raised questions about how someone capable of such brutality could have been walking free." The full scope of the tragedy wasn't immediately apparent to investigators. While they had discovered 4 bodies by the evening of July 29th, the meticulous process of evidence collection and victim identification would take days to complete. Dr. Patricia Kumar worked through the night, conducting preliminary examinations at the scene before the bodies could be transported to the state medical examiner's office in Nashville. Her findings painted a picture of calculated execution rather than crimes of passion. The victims were found in a line, approximately 10 feet apart from each other, Kumar reported. Each had been shot once in the back of the head with what appears to be a .40 caliber handgun. The positioning suggests they were forced to kneel facing away from their killer. The medical examiner's initial timeline suggested the murders had occurred sometime between 10 p.m. on July 28th and 2 a.m. on July 29th, just hours before baby Emma was discovered on Mary Thompson's porch. Evidence technicians worked the scene for 3 full days, collecting shell casings, photographing footprints, and mapping the locations of personal effects scattered throughout the woods. Among the items found were Adriana's purse, still containing $47 in cash and her ID, suggesting robbery was not the motive. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the discovery of a small pink diaper bag hidden under a fallen log. Inside were bottles, formula, and extra clothes for baby Emma, evidence that even in their final hours, the family had been caring for the infant who would become the sole survivor. Ballistics expert Troy Morrison from the TBI analyzed the shell casings found at the scene. "We recovered 4.40 caliber casings, all fired from the same weapon," Morrison reported. The spacing and trajectory angles confirmed that the shooter stood approximately 6 feet behind each victim. The autopsy results, completed on August 1st, revealed additional disturbing details. Courtney Rose had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she had tried to fight back. Braden Williams, at just 15 years old, had rope burns on his wrists, indicating he had been restrained before being murdered. This was a methodical execution, Dr. Kumar concluded in her final report. The killer took time to position each victim. This wasn't a crime of passion or spontaneous violence. This was planned and carried out with cold calculation. The discovery of the family's cell phones, all found smashed or destroyed in different locations around the crime scene, suggested the killer had taken steps to prevent the victims from calling for help or being tracked. Perhaps most chilling was the evidence that baby Emma had been at the scene. A pacifier found near Adriana's body tested positive for the infant's saliva. Investigators theorized that the killer had taken the baby from the scene, likely intending to abandon her somewhere she would be found alive, a decision that would prove crucial to the investigation. The investigation quickly zeroed in on Austin Robert Drummond, the mysterious figure that multiple witnesses had placed with the family in the days leading up to the murders. What investigators discovered about Drummond's background would prove to be as disturbing as the crimes themselves. Born on March 15, 1997, in Jackson, Tennessee, Austin Drummond had been in and out of the criminal justice system since he was a juvenile. His first arrest came at age 16 for armed robbery, followed by a string of increasingly serious offenses, including assault, drug trafficking, and weapons charges. Detective Harrison, leading the background investigation, uncovered a pattern of violence that stretched back nearly a decade. This guy's been escalating for years, Harrison told his team. Every arrest, every conviction, the crimes get more serious. Drummond's most recent incarceration had been at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville, where he served 18 months on weapons and drug charges. But it was what happened during his time in prison that would become central to the case. According to prison records, Drummond had been involved in a violent altercation with another inmate in March 2024. The incident, which left the other prisoner hospitalized with severe injuries, had resulted in additional charges being filed against Drummond for attempted murder. He had been released on $75,000 bond in May 2025, just 2 months before the quadruple murder. Prison officials noted that Drummond had exhibited increasingly erratic behavior during his final months of incarceration. He had claimed to guards and fellow inmates that he was working with federal authorities on an undercover operation targeting gang activity within the prison system. He told anyone who would listen that he was some kind of federal informant, reported Correctional Officer Marcus Williams. Most inmates dismissed it as fantasy, but Drummond seemed to genuinely believe it. He would talk about his handlers and his mission like he was some kind of secret agent. The revelation of Drummond's federal agent claims would later become central to his defense strategy, but at the time of the investigation, law enforcement saw it as evidence of his deteriorating mental state and propensity for delusional thinking. TBI agent Roche coordinated with federal authorities to run background checks on Drummond through FBI, DEA, and ATF databases. We found absolutely no evidence that Austin Drummond had any connection to federal law enforcement agencies, Roche reported. No records of him ever being recruited as an informant, no payments, no contact with federal agents. It was complete fabrication. Surveillance footage from various locations helped investigators track Drummond's movements in the days leading up to the murders. Security cameras at a gas station in Dyersburg showed him filling up his black Chevrolet Silverado at 11:47 p.m. on July 28th, just hours before the estimated time of the murders. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered that Drummond had been living with James Wilson and Adriana Williams on and off for several weeks before the murders. Landlord Patricia Mills provided crucial information about the living arrangement. James came to me in early July asking if a friend could stay for a few weeks, Mills recalled. He said the guy was getting back on his feet after some legal troubles. I was hesitant, but James vouched for him. Looking back, I should have said no. Neighbors reported increasing tensions at the apartment complex. Loud arguments could be heard at all hours, and several residents complained about the intimidating presence of Drummond's black pickup truck. You could feel the tension building, reported neighbor Sandra Martinez. That last week before they all disappeared, there was screaming almost every night. I heard Adriana crying, begging someone to leave. I should have called the police. The manhunt for Austin Drummond began in earnest on July 30th, when his identity was confirmed through fingerprints found at the crime scene. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued a blue alert, and Drummond's photo was broadcast across multiple states. Law enforcement agencies from Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Missouri coordinated in what would become one of the largest manhunts in the region's recent history. FBI resources were brought in to assist with tracking Drummond's digital footprint and potential contacts. The break investigators had been waiting for came on August 3rd, when Drummond's cell phone pinged a tower near Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. The university was placed on lockdown as SWAT teams from multiple agencies converged on the campus. We had credible intelligence that he might be hiding somewhere on or near the university grounds, explained FBI Special Agent Robertson, who coordinated the federal response. Given his history of violence and the nature of his crimes, we weren't taking any chances. The search of the university grounds lasted 6 hours, but came up empty. However, investigators were closing in on a network of associates who had been helping Drummond evade capture. On August 4th, authorities arrested 3 individuals on charges of aiding and abetting a fugitive. De'Ara Sanders, 26, Tanaka Brown, 29, and Giovant Thomas, 31, were taken into custody at various locations around Jackson. Under interrogation, one of them broke and revealed Drummond's location. Sanders finally admitted they had been providing him with money, food, and temporary shelter, reported Detective Captain Gonzalez. She told us he was staying in an abandoned house on the outskirts of Jackson, changing locations every few hours. The final confrontation came at 4:23 a.m. on August 5th. Acting on Sanders' information, a joint task force surrounded a vacant house at 1247 Porter Street in Jackson. Drummond was found hiding in the basement, armed with a .40 caliber handgun that would later be confirmed as the murder weapon. Body camera footage from Officer Dale Murphy showed the tense final moments. "Austin Drummond, this is the police. Come out with your hands visible. I'm a federal agent." Drummond could be heard shouting from inside the house. "You don't understand what's happening here. Exit the building now with your hands up. I'm working undercover. I need to speak to my handler." The standoff lasted 23 minutes before Drummond finally surrendered. As he was led away in handcuffs, he continued insisting on his federal agent status. "You're making a mistake," he told arresting officers. "I was deep cover. Those people I killed were drug dealers and gang members. This was a sanctioned operation." Detective Harrison, who was present at the arrest, later described Drummond's demeanor as eerily calm for someone who had just been captured after a week-long manhunt. He genuinely seemed to believe his own story about being a federal agent. It wasn't an act. He had convinced himself it was true. Austin Drummond made his first court appearance on August 6, 2025, at the Lake County Courthouse. The small courtroom was packed with victims' family members, community supporters, and media representatives from across the state. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over the initial hearing, where formal charges were read. Drummond faced 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated kidnapping, 4 counts of felon in possession of firearm, and 1 count of possession of firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. When asked to enter a plea, Drummond's court-appointed attorney, public defender Marcus Webb, entered pleas of not guilty on all charges. However, it was Drummond's own statements during the hearing that capture headlines. "Your Honor," Drummond interrupted as charges were being read, "I need to explain the circumstances of my undercover operation." Judge Morrison immediately cautioned him against speaking without counsel present, but Drummond persisted. Those individuals were targets in a federal investigation into drug trafficking and gang activity. "I was acting under direct orders from my federal handlers." The courtroom erupted in gasps and angry murmurs from victims' family members. Judge Morrison gavelled for order and warned Drummond that any further outbursts will result in his removal from the courtroom. Lake County District Attorney Danny Goodman, Jr. wasted no time in announcing the state's intention to seek the death penalty. The brutal execution-style murders of four innocent people, including a 15-year-old child, warrant the ultimate punishment under Tennessee law. Goodman stayed outside the courthouse. The prosecutor's announcement was met with approval from the gathered crowd. Betty Williams, grandmother of two of the victims, spoke to reporters. "That man took away my babies. Adriana and Braden were all I had left, and he destroyed our family. If the state says he deserves to die for what he did, then I support that." During the bond hearing, prosecutor Sarah Chun presented evidence of Drummond's flight risk and danger to the community. The defendant spent a week evading capture, had assistance from multiple accomplices, and has shown no remorse for his actions, Chun argued. He continues to live in a delusional fantasy where he believes he was justified in executing for innocent people. Webb, Drummond's defender, attempted to argue for a reasonable bond, citing his client's lack of prior murder convictions and family ties to the community. However, his arguments were undermined when Drummond again interrupted the proceedings. "I need protective custody," Drummond announced. "My life is in danger because of my undercover work. There are people who want to silence me." Judge Morrison denied bond entirely, ordering Drummond held without bail at the Lake County Detention Center in solitary confinement for his own protection and the safety of other inmates. The hearing concluded with scheduling of a preliminary hearing for August 20th, giving the defense time to prepare and allowing prosecutors to complete their evidence gathering. As Drummond was led away in shackles, he turned to the gallery and made one final statement. "The truth will come out. When people understand what I was really doing, they'll see that I'm not the villain here." His words were met with anger from victims' family members. James Wilson's mother, Carol Wilson, stood up and shouted, "You killed my son. You killed babies. There's no excuse for what you did." As investigators dug deeper into Austin Drummond's background, a pattern emerged of missed opportunities and systemic failures that had allowed him to remain free despite escalating violence. Drummond's criminal history began in his teens, but it was his time in the Tennessee foster care system that appeared to be a crucial turning point. Removed from his birth family at age 12 due to severe neglect and abuse, Drummond was shuffled through 7 different foster homes over 4 years. Social worker Jennifer Phillips, who had handled Drummond's case for 2 years, painted a picture of a deeply troubled child who had been failed by the system. Austin was bright and could be charming, but he had severe attachment issues and exhibited increasingly concerning behaviors. Phillips revealed in an interview there were incidents of animal cruelty, fire setting, and threats against other foster children. Despite these red flags, Drummond aged out of the foster system at 18 without receiving adequate mental health treatment. "The resources just weren't there," Phillips admitted. "We knew he needed intensive therapy and possibly psychiatric medication, but the state facilities were overcrowded and underfunded." Drummond's adult criminal record showed a pattern of escalating violence that should have kept him behind bars. In 2019, he was arrested for aggravated assault after beating a man nearly to death outside a Nashville bar. The victim suffered permanent brain damage, but Drummond bargained down to simple assault and served only 8 months in county jail. "The system failed," said retired prosecutor Helen Martinez, who had handled several of Drummond's earlier cases. "We were so focused on reducing prison populations and costs that we lost sight of public safety. Someone with his history of violence should never have been walking free." The most glaring failure came in 2024, when Drummond was charged with attempted murder for the prison attack that left another inmate in a coma for 3 weeks. Despite the severity of the charges and his extensive criminal history, a combination of overcrowded jails and a lenient judge resulted in his release on bond. Judge William Crawford, who had approved Drummond's bond release, defended his decision in a statement. At the time, the defendant had no prior murder convictions, and his attorney presented evidence of mental health issues that suggested treatment rather than incarceration might be appropriate. Prison records revealed that Drummond's claims of being a federal informant had begun during his final months at Riverbend. Correctional officers noted that he had become increasingly paranoid and grandiose in his delusions. He started claiming he was working with the FBI to expose corruption in the prison system, reported guard captain James Morrison. He would approach other inmates claiming he was gathering intelligence for federal prosecutors. Most thought he was just crazy, but some of the more gullible inmates began to believe him. Mental health evaluations conducted during his incarceration had diagnosed Drummond with antisocial personality disorder and paranoid delusions, but he had refused treatment and been released without mandatory mental health follow-up. Dr. Rebecca Taylor, a forensic psychiatrist who reviewed Drummond's records, identified missed opportunities for intervention. The combination of childhood trauma, untreated mental illness, and repeated exposure to violence created a perfect storm. His federal agent delusion appears to be a form of grandiose thinking that allowed him to justify increasingly violent behavior. Perhaps most damning was the revelation that Drummond had been investigated by local police just 3 weeks before the murders for threatening behavior toward a former girlfriend. The woman, whose identity was protected, had filed a restraining order claiming Drummond had threatened to kill her and her family. "He told me he was working for the government and that he could make people disappear," the woman stated in her police report. "He said no one would ever find the bodies if he decided to get rid of someone." The restraining order was granted, but police had made no effort to verify his whereabouts or ensure compliance. The woman's report had been filed away without follow-up investigation. The revelation of systemic failures that had allowed Drummond to remain free sparked widespread outrage across Tennessee and beyond. Social media campaigns demanding justice and reform gained momentum, with hashtag Justice for Emma becoming a rallying cry for victims' rights advocates. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee faced mounting pressure to address the failures in the state's criminal justice and mental health systems. At a press conference on August 8th, Lee announced the formation of a task force to review cases where violent offenders had been released on bond. The tragic deaths of Adriana Williams, Braden Williams, Courtney Rose, and James Wilson represent a fundamental failure of our system to protect innocent citizens, Lee stated. "We owe it to their memory and to baby Emma to ensure this never happens again." Victims' rights organizations seized on the case as an example of misguided criminal justice reform. Cheryl Manning, director of Tennessee Victims First, organized rallies demanding stricter bond requirements for violent offenders. This case perfectly illustrates what happens when we prioritize the rights of criminals over the safety of law-abiding citizens. Manning told a crowd of 500 supporters gathered at the state capitol. Austin Drummond should have been in prison, not walking free to murder an entire family. The case also sparked debate about mental health resources and the treatment of individuals with severe personality disorders. Dr. Patricia Kumar, the state medical examiner, called for increased funding for forensic mental health programs. "We cannot simply warehouse mentally ill individuals in prisons without treatment," Kumar argued. "But we also cannot release dangerous individuals back into society without proper safeguards and monitoring." Legal experts pointed to the case as evidence of broader problems in Tennessee's bond system. Professor David Chin of Vanderbilt Law School noted that judges often lack adequate information about defendants' mental health history when making bond decisions. The system is designed to process cases quickly and efficiently, but it's not equipped to identify and properly handle individuals with complex mental health issues and violent histories, Chin explained. The community response extended beyond calls for systemic reform. A GoFundMe account established for baby Emma's care raised over $400,000 in the first week. The funds would be placed in a trust to provide for the infant's education and long-term needs. Local businesses organized fundraisers, and country music artists planned a benefit concert for September. The outpouring of support demonstrated the community's determination to find something positive in the aftermath of tragedy. Betty Williams, who had gained custody of baby Emma, became an unlikely advocate for criminal justice reform. Despite her grief, she began speaking at rallies and legislative hearings. "I don't want my babies to have died for nothing," Williams told lawmakers at a hearing on bond reform. "If telling their story can save even one other family from going through this nightmare, then their deaths will have meaning." The Tennessee legislature announced plans to consider emergency legislation tightening bond requirements for violent offenders and mandating mental health evaluations for certain classes of defendants. Religious leaders across the state organized prayer services and called for both justice and healing. The case had touched a nerve in communities far beyond rural Tennessee, becoming a symbol of broader concerns about public safety and criminal justice policy. As the legal proceedings continue and the community begins a long process of healing, The story of Austin Drummond and his victims serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences when systems designed to protect us fail. Adriana Williams was more than just a victim in a news story. She was a young mother who had overcome tremendous challenges to build a stable life for herself and her daughter. Friends remember her infectious laugh and her fierce devotion to baby Emma. She had dreams of becoming a nurse and had been saving money to enroll in community college. Adriana never gave up, recalled her best friend Sarah Henderson. After her parents died, she could have fallen apart, but she stayed strong for Braden and for Emma. She was determined to break the cycle of tragedy in her family. 15-year-old Braden Williams had been looking forward to his sophomore year of high school. An honor roll student with aspirations of playing college basketball, he had recently grown 6 inches and was excited about trying out for the varsity team. His guidance counselor described him as one of those kids who lights up a room with his smile. Courtney Rose had stepped in as a mother figure to her niece and nephew after their parents' death, sacrificing her own plans to ensure their stability and love. A talented artist who had once dreamed of opening her own gallery, Rose had instead focused her creativity on making a home for the 2 teenagers. Courtney gave up everything for those kids, said her sister Maria. She never married, never had children of her own, because she was so committed to raising Adriana and Braden. She was the glue that held our family together. James Matthew Wilson, at 21, had been working 2 jobs to support his young family. Despite his own troubled background, friends said he was dedicated to being a better father than his own had been. He had recently proposed to Adriana and was planning to enroll in trade school to become an electrician. James wasn't perfect, but he was trying to do right by Adriana and the baby, said his supervisor at the auto parts store where Wilson worked. He would talk about Emma constantly, how smart she was, how much she was growing. He was so proud to be her father. Now, 7-month-old Emma Wilson will grow up knowing her family only through photographs and stories. Betty Williams, despite her own grief and advanced age, has committed to raising the child with love and ensuring she knows the truth about the family she lost. Emma will know how much her mama loved her, Betty Williams said, cradling the infant who would become the center of her world. She'll know about her daddy James and her uncle Braden and her great-aunt Courtney. She'll know they were good people who didn't deserve what happened to them. The case has also raised profound questions about the nature of evil and the warning signs that society too often ignores. Austin Drummond's transformation from troubled foster child to cold-blooded killer represents a failure not just of the criminal justice system, but of the social safety net that should have intervened decades earlier. Dr. Rebecca Taylor, the forensic psychiatrist who studied Drummond's case, believes his federal agent delusion was more than just mental illness. It was a sophisticated psychological mechanism that allowed him to justify increasingly violent behavior. Drummond created an elaborate fantasy where he was a hero of his own story, Taylor explained. By convincing himself he was working for the government, he could rationalize murder as patriotic duty. It's a form of moral disengagement that we see in some of the most dangerous criminals. The delusion also served another purpose. It elevated Drummond's status in his own mind from failed criminal to important government operative. For someone with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and abandonment, the fantasy provided a sense of purpose and significance that had been missing from his life. He had been rejected by every system he encountered: family, foster care, schools, employers, romantic partners, noted Dr. Patricia Kumar. The federal agent fantasy gave him a way to reframe those rejections as necessary sacrifices for a greater mission. The community of Tiptonville and surrounding areas will carry the scars of this tragedy for generations. Children who once played freely in backyards now have parents who watch them constantly. Neighbors who never locked their doors now install security systems and motion lights. But there are also signs of resilience and hope. The Emma Williams Memorial Fund has grown to over $800,000, ensuring the sole survivor will have resources for education and therapy. Local schools have implemented trauma counseling programs, recognizing that the entire community needs healing. Pastor Robert Williams of First Baptist Church has seen his congregation grow by nearly 200 members since the murders, as people seek comfort and meaning in the wake of senseless violence. People are asking the hard questions, Williams observed. Why do bad things happen to good people? How do we find hope in darkness? These are ancient questions, but they feel urgent and personal now. The case has also sparked a broader conversation about the romanticization of violence in American culture. Some observers note that Drummond's federal agent fantasy mirrors the plots of countless movies and television shows where violence is justified in service of a greater good. We live in a culture that constantly reinforces the idea that violence can be heroic if you're fighting for the right cause, said media studies professor Dr. Janet Morrison. For someone with Drummond's psychological profile, that messaging can be extremely dangerous. As Austin Drummond awaits trial, confined to a solitary cell where he continues to insist on his innocence and federal agent status, the victims' families face the difficult journey of rebuilding their lives around an absence that can never be filled. The legal proceedings are expected to last at least 2 years, with mental competency evaluations, extensive pretrial motions, and ultimately a death penalty trial that will force the community to relive the horror of that July night when 4 innocent people were marched into the woods and executed. District Attorney Danny Goodman Jr. has promised that the state will seek justice not just for the victims, but for baby Emma, who will grow up without the family that loved her. Every time I look at that beautiful little girl, I'm reminded of what Austin Drummond took from her. Goodman said, "She'll never hear her mother's lullabies, never get advice from her uncle, never feel the love of the aunt who sacrificed everything to raise her mother. That's a debt that can never be repaid, but we can make sure he pays the ultimate price for what he's done." The story of Austin Drummond and his victims serves as a cautionary tale about the intersection of mental illness, criminal justice, and societal neglect. It raises uncomfortable questions about how many other Austin Drummonds are walking among us, harboring delusions that could turn deadly without warning. But perhaps more importantly, it's a story about the preciousness of ordinary life, of young mothers working to provide for their children, teenagers dreaming of basketball scholarships, and sacrificing their own ambitions for family, and young fathers trying to build better lives for their children. In the end, that may be Austin Drummond's greatest crime. Not just that he killed 4 people, but that he destroyed the simple, beautiful ordinariness of their lives and replaced it with a legacy of violence and fear. As baby Emma grows up in the loving care of her great-grandmother, the hope is that she will remember not the darkness that claimed her family, but the light they brought to the world during their too brief time here. In their memory, and in her survival, perhaps some small meaning can be found in otherwise senseless tragedy. The case continues to evolve as investigators uncover new details about Drummond's past and the events leading up to that fateful night. But the central questions remain: how do we prevent such tragedies? How do we identify and help troubled individuals before they become dangerous? And how do we honor the memory of the innocent while ensuring that justice is served? Those are questions that extend far beyond the courtrooms of Tennessee, touching on fundamental issues of mental health, criminal justice reform, and the social contract that binds us all together. The answers won't bring back Adriana, Braden, Courtney, and James, but they might help ensure that other families are spared the devastating loss that has forever changed a small Tennessee community. In the quiet moments, when the media cameras are gone and the courtroom is empty, what remains is a simple truth that 4 good people are gone, 1 innocent child is orphaned, and a community is left to pick up the pieces of a shattered sense of safety and trust. That ultimately is the true cause of Austin Drummond's delusions. Not just the lives he took, but the innocence he destroyed, the trust he violated, and the fear he planted in the hearts of everyone who heard this story and wondered, could it happen here?